Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, we are bypassing the standard agenda today to dive straight in. We're taking a cinematic, documentary-style look at the hidden mechanics of the oil and gas exploration and production sector, what's often just called E&P. We're going to examine this really fascinating intersection, where the natural world collides head-on with corporate balance sheets. Because in this space, ecology isn't just a nice-to-have conversation about conservation. It is a direct, highly measurable financial liability.
So here is the core premise we're investigating. How does ecological sensitivity dictate financial viability in the oil and gas sector? It's absolutely crucial to understand this. In E&P, the physical environment literally controls the financial bottom line. Think about it. An exploration company's balance sheet is built almost entirely on the value of its proved reserves. But an oil reserve is only as valuable as the company's ability to safely and legally extract it. If the environment surrounding that oil is highly sensitive, the financial reality of getting it out of the ground changes drastically. You can go from a highly lucrative asset to a completely stranded one, just like that.
All right, Section 1, the stakes of extraction, valuation, and operational risk.
To investigate this impartially, we are going to follow the risk. We'll look at the visceral reality of E&P operations and uncover how the biological traits of a piece of land directly impact extraction costs, regulatory hurdles, and ultimately the future value of those oil reserves. To do this, we're using the rigorous framework set up by the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB. Specifically, their standard for oil and gas exploration and production, focusing right on the Biodiversity Impacts section. These are the exact standardized metrics institutional investors use to uncover the hidden financial liabilities of ecological impacts. This isn't about ethical judgments or PR. This is strict, quantifiable financial accounting for environmental risk.
The core formula driving this industry is pretty unforgiving. Ecological sensitivity equals extraction complexity plus higher costs. Operating in these sensitive zones leads to prohibitive cleanup costs, really severe regulatory penalties, and the potential depreciation of the oil reserves themselves. If a company suddenly faces new conservation laws or insurmountable logistical hurdles, the value of those assets can completely plummet before a single barrel is ever pumped. The ecosystem literally dictates the economics here.
Moving on to Section 2, tracking hydrocarbon spills, following the risk.
You know, the most tangible, visible liability in this industry is the physical release of hydrocarbons. The absolute second oil leaves controlled infrastructure and hits soil or water, the financial clocks start ticking. And the tracking threshold is incredibly granular. We're talking exactly 1 barrel. That's 159 liters. Under these rigorous reporting standards, this is the precise volume at which a spill has to be officially recorded and disclosed to investors once it escapes containment. It really goes to show just how closely the industry has to monitor its operational integrity. Every single liter beyond that threshold represents a tracked financial liability on the books.
And the standard for what actually counts as a reportable release? Super strict. It tracks releases from above-ground facilities, below-ground pipelines, entity-owned transport, and even just slow leakage over time. But look at this part, the inclusion of sabotage or earthquakes, even catastrophic events that are entirely outside of a company's operational control instantly become tracked financial liabilities. A massive force majeure event like an earthquake does not erase the financial or regulatory responsibility to respond and clean it up.
But what happens after a spill actually occurs? We have to contrast short-term recovery with long-term remediation. The reporting standard strictly defines recovered volumes as only the oil physically removed from the environment during the immediate short-term response. It explicitly excludes amounts that have evaporated, burned off, or, and this is key, amounts recovered during massive, expensive, long-term remediation efforts. Those unrecovered barrels represent a lingering financial black hole, dragging out costs for years, sometimes even decades.
Section 3, the Arctic vulnerability, extreme environments.
Let's zoom out geographically for a second. Because spilling a barrel of oil in a standard, temperate environment is one thing, but spilling it in an extreme ecosystem, that exponentially multiplies the financial and logistical risks. The standard explicitly requires companies to disclose spill volumes in the Arctic, and it precisely geolocates it as the area north of the Arctic Circle at approximately 66 degrees 33 minutes north latitude. By defining this exact physical coordinate, the standard completely grounds the financial data in geographic reality. The Arctic is heavily scrutinized because the extreme weather, moving ice, and remote logistics make response efforts incredibly complex and devastatingly expensive.
To further highlight how location dictates cost, investors track spills impacting shorelines with Environmental Sensitivity Index, or ESI rankings, of 8 to 10. Think about standard operational cleanups compared to places like mangroves and swamps. These shorelines have immense biological productivity. A spill in a mangrove swamp doesn't just require a quick fix. The oil gets trapped deep in these complex root systems, and you can't easily bring heavy cleanup machinery into the soft intertidal terrain without causing even more damage. That triggers massive, highly complex operations that financially dwarf your standard everyday incident.
Which leads into Section 4, Protected Conservation Areas, Reserves versus Habitats. This brings us to a massive valuation risk that occurs before a single spill even happens. What happens when the industry's proved and probable oil reserves overlap with internationally protected lands? Companies are actually required to disclose the percentage of their reserves located in specific global classifications. We're talking IUCN protected areas, Ramsar wetlands, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and Natura 2000 sites. Overlapping with these zones triggers immediate regulatory nightmares and severely restricts or completely eliminates a company's legal ability to extract their proved reserves.
To really grasp the weight of this barrier, listen to the official definition from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. A protected area is a clearly defined geographical space, recognized, dedicated, and managed, through legal or other effective means, to achieve the long-term conservation of nature. Those words, legal or other effective means, that is a formidable wall. They signify deeply entrenched legislation and international consensus protecting these ecosystems that can make extraction either legally impossible or financially ruinous.
But here's the kicker. The risk doesn't just apply if you're drilling directly inside a park boundary. The reporting standard rigorously defines near as within 5 kilometers of the boundary of a protected status area or an endangered species habitat, specifically those on the IUCN Red List. Why a 5-kilometer buffer? Well, the biological reality of heavy industry extends way beyond the drill bit itself. Noise pollution from seismic testing disrupts breeding grounds, infrastructure runoff travels through watersheds, and constant light pollution impacts nocturnal species. Mere proximity to critical wildlife can literally threaten the entire valuation of adjacent oil assets.
Section 5. Standardizing Environmental Management. The Life Cycle.
So how on earth does the E&P sector navigate this minefield to keep their assets from becoming stranded? They have to proactively build strategies to track and mitigate risk relentlessly across a project's entire lifespan. It starts right at the pre-bid phase, with intense due diligence before site acquisition. Then it moves through the highly disruptive exploration and appraisal phases, ramps up drastically during decades of active hydrocarbon production, and doesn't actually end until the incredibly costly closure, decommissioning, and restoration of the site. Missing an environmental protocol at literally any of these phases can invite massive litigation and totally shut an operation down.
To ensure they're managing this whole life cycle correctly, companies are judged on how well their policies align with global benchmarks, notably the International Finance Corporation's Performance Standard 6 on biodiversity conservation. This is pretty much the ultimate benchmark for operating anywhere near critical habitat. Complying with this requires rigorous baseline studies, deep community engagement, and a strict mitigation hierarchy to avoid or offset impacts. Aligning with this standard is basically how companies attempt to safeguard their operational viability while navigating these highly sensitive, high-risk zones.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. When a pristine environment gains protected status, what actually happens to the financial value of the oil trapped beneath it? As we've seen today, the environment is absolutely not just some static backdrop for heavy industry. It's an active, highly regulated force that dictates the financial realities of global energy production. I really hope this explainer has given you a powerful new lens to understand the hidden mechanics of ESG risk. Keep exploring and keep following the risk.